Hello, how you doing today? My name is Troy Wise. I'm with Aspire Counseling and Consulting Services, where we support individuals with building up communication in their relationships. This is a thing that's necessary to build intimacy. Today, I'm going to be talking about a subject that looks like it's fairly new news, something that I find very interesting because I've been kind of thinking that this is the case all along in practice. But what I want to be talking about today is the science has come out that indicates that depression is not caused by chemical imbalance in the brain. They're saying depression is not caused by chemical imbalance in the brain. Now, for a long time, it's been believed, I think maybe even since the 80s or maybe before, don't quote me on that, but for a very long time, it's been believed that the reason why depression emerges with us is because there are some types of chemical imbalances that kind of set things off relative to neurotransmitters, serotonin, a deficit of serotonin. As a matter of fact, many of our antidepressants, such as Prozac, Prozac, they provide what we call serotonin. They're known to be or labeled as SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They help to supply serotonin in the system in order to support us not being depressed. This has been the thought. I must say this. We're not saying that antidepressants aren't effective, although it can be argued that talk therapy is more effective and other interventions are more effective. That's an argument, okay? Many of our clients that come to see us, they don't end up having to have medications. That's often. But also medications have their uses, so don't get me wrong. But due to a lot of political types of things and, a medical model that basically states that everything is a disease that has to be treated by medications, it's my belief that these things have come about. And so it's good to see research that indicates something differently. I know from working with my clients, the reason why I never bought into it is because they would say, well, it's this brain and chemical situation, which I'm not saying this is not somewhat relevant in some cases, but this was being overused. But they would say all these things created depression. But what I would notice with my clients is that no one really comes in with depression and some of these other mental health conditions that don't have a reason to be depressed. In other words, there are things that have gone on in my life, not just based on the present, but also leading back to my childhood and things like that, that are relevant to me feeling this way. And that's why we talk it out and do talk therapy. So I've never been sold on it. But this is what they're saying. Looking at my time here. This is what they're saying. Many people take antidepressants because they have been led to believe that their depression has been a biochemical cause. But this is what the science is saying. But this new research suggests this belief is not grounded in evidence. Isn't that interesting? It's always been difficult to prove a negative, and this is concerning research. But I think that we can safely say after a vast amount of research conducted over several decades, so this is like longitudinal studies that have been done not just in a few years, but over decades, that there is, with all these studies compiled together, there's no convincing evidence that depression is caused by serotonin abnormalities, particularly by lower levels of or reduced activity of serotonin. And this is by Professor Joanna Moncrief. I'm probably not saying her name right. And she's this new study's lead author. So this is really interesting that we're finding these revelations. And I think that it's important because it helps us to not just think from the model of treat everything with medicine. I'm kind of anti that. I think that whether it's things with your health or whether it's things with your mental health, that we need to look first to the natural ways, talking things out when we're talking about mental health conditions, and seeing how we can bring about resolution. And this is what we do at our practice. This is what we do. We're big proponents of this in our therapy practice. So let me talk a little bit about trauma, okay? For those of you all who are not familiar with trauma and trauma's effect on relationships, because relationships, not just romantic relationships, but relationships in general, are often impacted by trauma. And what I did not mention is that what the science is now saying, that what many of us have always believed, is that much of the reason why people end up having depression is relative to past experience, relative to a correlation of trauma experiences. This we do know for a fact. Now, I can attest to that myself from what I have been exposed to, but let's talk a little bit about trauma. So this is the thing. If you have trauma, it's going to be difficult for us many times to attach in relationships. For example, if I've been nurtured in an environment to where I don't feel protected, to where I don't feel like people trust me, I don't feel like they believe in me, I don't feel like that they have my best interest, I feel like they doubt me, I'm being negatively spoken against about how intelligent or lack of intelligence that I may have, I'm insecure as a result of all this. So if this is the way that I've come up, 9 times out of 10, y'all, I know y'all hear me talking about this all the time, but this is the way to get out of this. Is to go to this stuff and deal with it, right? But 9 times out of 10, if I've had those kind of situations, then when I move into other relationships, I'm going to base what I believe about myself and how I fit into those relationships on what I have been taught and exposed to. Okay? And so when let's talk a little bit about trauma. So what is trauma? All right. And most of the studies that I have been exposed to primarily deal with childhood trauma. Okay. But there's other trauma that's not childhood, like if you saw somebody get their head blown off, or you were in an accident, something like that. But a lot of what's been studied is the childhood trauma. And some of this may involve sexual abuse, emotional abuse, parental neglect. That your parents were separated or divorced. So in other words, you didn't have one parent in the home at some given time. That's considered trauma. Okay. You may have had a parent that was on drugs or an alcoholic. You may have had a depressed parent, or a parent that had some type of mental health condition. And this is the thing. A lot of our parents have experienced this, but they just have gone on undiagnosed. So we kind of really got to look into that. And this is where the therapist helps out, because a lot of times this is what people are being exposed to. Domestic violence, a depressed or mentally ill parent, a relative who was in prison. This is all considered trauma. And all these things impact the way that we communicate in relationships. So this is the thing I want to stress too, is that, just to summarize things, is that a lot of us are afraid to look into our experiences, because we think that once we look into it, it's going to tell us something that we're afraid of. A lot of us haven't even spelled out what that thing is that we think is going to tell us. The closer, one of the things I've found is that the closer that we get to understanding and detailing what it is that we are afraid of, as far as what we've been exposed to, as far as the negative thoughts that circulate in our mind and we don't want to take it no further, as far as that trauma that you might have had, as far as that detached relationship that you may have had with a parent, the more that we veer away from that, you're going to be directly impacted by that in your relationships. The more we come closer, sometimes these things are a quicker fix than what we know. Okay, and I just want to end there. I've gone longer than what I wanted to go. But, hey, look, we have a team of clinicians, counselors available to help you if you need to navigate through some of these concerns. And you've got to remember, it doesn't mean that there's some deep issue, some deep problem with you. It just means that, look, I'm looking to connect better in relationships. We have a team that's ready to help you, help your child, help your teen. We help pretty much all ages, and we want to do that for you if it's something that you need. Please give us a call, Aspire Counseling Consulting Service. Once again, I hope this has been of help for you, and you have a blessed day. All right, bye-bye.